I was talking to my daughter, and she said, "Mommy, I want to go swim." And I said, "Okay, go upstairs, put on your swimsuit, come back to Mommy." And the second I said that, I mean, his eyes just kind of got big, and he goes, "Ah."
It happened afterwards that Absalom, the son of David, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. And Amnon, her half-brother, the son of David, was in love with her. Amnon was so frustrated because of his half-sister Tamar that he made himself sick, for she was a virgin, and Amnon thought it impossible for him to do anything to her.
Can you see how wrong that is? First of all, this is her stepbrother, right?
Or half-brother.
Yeah. Tamar is just innocent, just a beautiful girl, a virgin. And in those days, they were like teenagers. They were like 13, 14, 15. The most would be 15. So this calls to the, the vulnerability of a child. And you can imagine Jonathan and Susie Lamb having their little girl, a beautiful little girl, being exposed to someone who has been looking at her.
So we finished breakfast, and Pete had the baby again, and he was doing something in the kitchen, and I was talking to my daughter, and she said, "Mommy, I want to go swim." And I said, "Okay, go upstairs, put on your swimsuit, come back to Mommy." And the second I said that, I mean, his eyes just kind of got big, and he goes, "Ah." And he started to follow her. Yes, that baby was right there, and he just started to follow. The baby was a non-factor. The truth is so simple. He saw her, he goes, "Ah," and he started to follow her up. And I felt such panic eyes.
Looking at her. A predator. Can you imagine the wrong that is? It's so demonic. A young person or an innocent person is supposed to be protected in of themselves. And there's somebody dark having this whole plan.
Because I just knew if it was me stopping it, they'd be like, "Susie, look what you're doing again." And that's what, today they have to admit that he was caught in that room because of Jonathan's crazy reaction, like very strong. But all I can do is tell the truth before God. He followed her up there, panic set in my heart, and I told Jonathan, and he ran.
Pete, or whatever he calls himself now, has not been doing this for the first time.
I was brushing my teeth when Susie came. She said, "Hey, Pete is falling apart." So I dropped my toothbrush and I ran up to the third floor. And I got up there. The first thing I noticed is I lock eyes on my daughter. She doesn't have any clothes on. And so immediately I start screaming, "What are you doing?" to Pete.
What is Pete doing? They're saying he's looking out the window in some of these.
Pete is by the window. Whenever I started to scream, obviously my eyes initially locked with, so I screamed, "What are you doing?" And he immediately goes to saying, I'm so sorry, at least 50 times.
Clearly, Amnon has been so sexually perverse. And so now that his half-sister, he's trying to get advice.
Coming of age, and he's just waiting to pounce on her,
Yeah.
And to think that he got himself feeling sick for that. He said he made himself sick. That is, he began to craft a methodology or a way of carrying out his intent.
Yeah.
And these intents were not good intent, as we'll see as we read on.
Yeah.
So in verse 3, it says, "But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother. And Jonadab was a very shrewd or cunning man." Does that sound like some people that we've heard in this whole saga going on right now? Verse 4, he said to Amnon, "Why are you, the king's son, so depressed morning after morning? Will you not tell me?" And Amnon said to him, "I am in love with Tamar, my half-brother Absalom's sister." In other words, his half-sister. He's in love with his half-sister. Very wrong, right?
Yeah.
Verse 5, Jonadab said to him, said to Amnon, "Go to bed and pretend you are sick. And when your father David comes to see you, say to him, 'Just let my sister Tamar come and serve me food, and let her prepare it in my sight, so that I may see it and eat it from her hand.
So this is where we're also trying to advise parents. Trying to advise parents at this point, because here is a brother wanting to eat from his very pretty sister, right? And unfortunately, many parents blame themselves because they blame themselves when their child is molested.
Usually, perpetrators of CSA are known, trusted people. I'm talking about family members, friends of family, boyfriends. I hate to say it, but it's true. Uncles, stepdads, and there are circumstances where you have female perpetrators of CSA, but largely, and it is often males who are perpetrators of it.
Mhm.
And I want to stress that the concept of a stranger doing it is very, very rare.
It's because they trusted these people. And I think at this point, David wasn't so protective of Tamar as he was quick to listen to his heir apparent.
Yeah, Amnon.
Yeah. And we want to advise parents, whoever it is, whether it is your brother, whether it's your father, whether it's your, like, we're not saying put bad thoughts in your mind, but a minor or somebody in your care should be protected at all costs. Because the enemy can use anyone. It's always the evil person or the person that decides to choose evil coming for the vulnerable. Yeah, we have cases where parents, even we know people whose dads have molested them. Yeah, repeatedly. And their moms didn't say anything. You hear of Joyce Meyer, right? Yeah, she has repeated her story over and over.
I prayed for my dad to die. That didn't happen. I prayed for my mother to leave him. That didn't happen. I prayed he'd leave me alone. That didn't happen. Why didn't God help me?
So it calls for caution, especially mothers. Watch out for your girls.
So how old were you when the abuse started with your dad?
Well, I was just very, very young when he started to put his hands on me and do different things. And but when I was a young teenager, it went beyond just putting his hands on me to just making me his mistress. And my mom caught him when I was a teenager. She came home unexpectedly and caught him. And
they are known, trusted.
I was praying.
people.
I was asking him. I was just innocent
Sure,
little kid
I would have
being
liked to have had.
abused.
I'll never know what it's like to have a great dad. I'll never know what it's like to be able to sit on my dad's lap, put my arms around his neck, and just get a hug without fear that it's going to turn into something else. I'll never be able to be hurting and ask my dad to go have coffee with me and sit down and just tell him what I'm going through and have him really care. I'll never have that. And literally what he did was he raped me. And he did it every week, at least once a week, until the time I was 18.
Mothers, watch out for your girls. Fathers, watch out for your girls and your boys. Watch out for all of them. You've heard Donnie McLaughlin's story. He's very vocal about his story, how his uncle, would sodomize him, and he grew up having a homosexual lifestyle and desires. And in all these cases, when they grow older, it's hard for them to trust anybody. And in most cases, they deal with so many mental issues. Some of them don't get married over time.
It's hard to settle into marriage.
Yeah, or they get into drinking a lot to get rid of that pain. What we're trying to say is what comes on a sexually abused person is not normal. It's a spirit, it's a harassing spirit that steals their self-worth. And we'll see this as we go into Tamar's story. We'll see what became of her. But at this place where the son was asking, David's son was asking his father for this particular sister to come and cook for him because he's sick. We're asking you, think hard. how will this one person cooking for you heal your sickness?
Right?
Yeah.
And she wasn't a medical student.
Yeah, and they had servants. Yeah. It wasn't a medical student.
Right.
How were her cakes better? Did she have, is she popular for being the best chef of some sort? They had servants. So, whatever it is, just protect your children. Many parents are working so hard, and sometimes they leave their kids in the hands of some trusted people they know in church, pastors, and those kids end up being molested. We know a case where this woman didn't know that the pastor and the wife were molested, and the son were molesting her 5-year-old until when this lady was in her 40s. The mother was devastated. It's shocking that all those years she left her child in the custody of her pastor and the wife while she worked hard, and these things were happening to her child. So we're saying to parents, we're saying to anyone who has a minor in their care, don't entrust any of your children to anybody's care.
Without supervision.
Without supervision.
Find a way. We know there are times you can't but just do what you need to do, maybe work especially.
Yeah.
And this particularly with single parents.
Yeah.
You see, the devil is very wicked.
Yes.
The first thing he has attacked in humanity has been the family unit.
Yes.
And he is very, very vengeful at doing that, because how do you, it's hard enough for a couple, parents, father and mother, to keep watch over their children when both are working.
Yeah.
They have to carry out this kind of very tight schedule, go about, their time table and see how they can do that.
Yeah.
Now imagine cutting that down to a single parent.
Yeah.
With full custody of your children. It becomes almost impossible to not have to leave them in the care of another third party.
Yeah.
And this is where the devil has devised means of attacking these innocent minds and set them on a trajectory that will alter their destiny or alter their image, that God has destined for them to be.
Yeah.
And that's why we see a lot of things happening in life today. And so I want you to follow along, because there are very important lessons that we're going to get from this as pertains to the current situation with DAYSTAR.
Yeah.
So I continue verse 6, right?
Yes, please.
And he says, so Amnon lay down. Now Amnon, following the advice of Jonadab, his cousin, is beginning to execute now. So we continue. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be sick. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, please let my sister Tamar come and make a couple of cakes in my sight so that I may eat from her hand. Then David sent word to the house of Tamar, saying, go now to your brother Amnon's house and prepare some food for him. So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was in bed. And she took dough and kneaded it, and made cakes in his sight and baked them. She took the pan and dished them out before him, but he refused to eat. Now, what did he do? The next verse will tell us. And Amnon said, have everyone leave me. So everyone left him except Tamar. Now, on the red flag, we can just imagine Tamar was so innocent, so unsuspecting of her half-brother. So verse 10 now, then Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food into the bedroom so that I may eat from your hand. When she brought them to him to eat, he took hold of her hand and said, come lie with me, my sister. She replied, no, my brother, do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do this disgraceful thing.
Yeah.
But he would not listen to her. And since he was stronger than she, he violated her and lay with her. He went ahead and did what was on his mind. This had been his plan all along.
Yeah.
This wouldn't have been the first time Amnon was into things like this.
Yeah.
So he could have anyone he wanted to have, but focusing on his own half-sister was such an evil thing to do.
Yeah.
And if that young lady would knows this much to advise him, and he would turn it down, And that tells you it was not ordinary. There was a spirit by which he was operating that was seeking to express itself.
Yeah.
And he was a ready instrument and partnered with that spirit
Yeah.
to go ahead and perpetrate this ungodliness.
Yeah. I liked when you said this was a sexual perversive spirit, right? Because what we know with the demonic, especially when you speak with people who have come out of the occult, people who have been delivered from this kind of sexual situations, you find that the enemy wants them to be perverse. You know how people who are in the music or movie industry, most of them who have sold themselves to the devil, you find that it is all about sexual perversion. So this is more spiritual than anything. And so when there's a sexual perversive spirit, it will go to any length to have its way. And I wanted you to weigh in about dog wives too. You were telling me earlier about how.
I'm just saying, wouldn't that be the most honoring thing before the Lord?
It's not honoring to be abused. It's not honoring to be abused. It's not honoring to be neglected. It's not honoring to be untouched and unloved. It's not honoring to do that. You're saying just get beat up at home and suck it up because you wear the name Christian.
No, but
do it in the name of Jesus.
But can God change her heart? Can she change?
He orchestrated, and we were linking it with this Amnon spirit too, because once that spirit is there, it's about polluting the whole atmosphere.
Oh yeah, you know, when you think of what Amnon, you know, from the beginning, he made himself sick. He wearied himself with a sickening thoughts of his helplessness for not having his half sister.
Yeah,
and that's one thing you got to understand is that when we set our hearts, that's why the Bible says that whatever things are good, whatever things are of good report, whatever things are pure, that's what we should set our hearts on. Because the spirit realm understands thoughts. Thoughts are as loud as, if not louder than words. And so the demonic, they understand when we begin to crave and desire things that are not in line with the word of God or righteousness. And so you see, he from the very onset, we saw that Amnon wearied himself to a point of sickness, of sickening emotion. Because he desired his sister.
Is it not a sick spirit to go after a child? You're molesting a child. You have a wife in your house, and that's not enough. And you're going after a child. It's a sickening spirit. So I like that you brought that out. Voices are coming out also saying that they were sexually molested in Daystar. Even Susie has said how the chiropractor molested her, abused her within the grounds of Daystar. And
what happened? They paid him off.
And Joni literally told Laura Lynn Thompson that it never happened, that the man who molested Susie was a good man. So you see, she has been a voice for the predator.